Of our big program, we have got a fantastic guest with us today. Dennis Kucinich joins us. He has a powerful new autobiography, The Division of Light and Power. And Mr. Kucinich joins us today here on the telephone. And Dennis, you are just an amazing individual. You're a great writer. You were a great politician. Welcome to the program. It's an honor to speak with you today, my friend.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the invite, and I'm, grateful for a chance to be on your show. But by the way, the book covers only about a 10 to 15% period of my life, so there's a lot more that I haven't written about. But this covers an intensive period between 1969 and 1979.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Dennis J. Kucinich with us today. He joins us live, The Division of Light and Power. That is the latest from him. And Dennis, talk to me a little bit about why you decided to write this incredible book.
May I call you James?
Yes, go ahead, my friend. Yes.
Okay, James, I began this book in November of 1979, and it's been the idea of it has been a constant companion. Every time I go into a bookstore, I'd look at books and I think, nah, I got to write my book. And this story has been waiting to be told, and finally, I found the time to finish it. And it is a big work, fully documented, and the times require that people pay close attention to the relationships between big corporations and government.
Yes.
To see how big corporations can literally usurp the power of the people through controlling the government, and to see how the public services that each one of us has a right to expect from our government can be undermined by private interests that are looking for profit at the expense of the people. So this book is not just timely, but it's urgent for people who are really asking the question, who's the government working for? People will say, well, government doesn't work. Well, it's working. The question is, who's it working for? And this book gives every citizen the ability to figure out who's really in charge, who's making the decisions.
Well, one of the things when you were running for president, the couple different times that you ran, I always thought we would get to the point where we are now, unfortunately, where corporations pretty much run the world. And the thing that I find so strange is that the conservatives and the Republicans and the progressives and the Democrats, they may not agree on a lot of things, but they all are slowly agreeing on the fact that corporations and the elites, or whatever you want to refer to them, they control the world. Why is it that folks are starting to wake up to all that, Dennis?
Well, I hope you're right. I can tell you in Cleveland and what the Division of Light and Power is about. It's a documented story of corporate espionage, sabotage, interference with government, the attempt to overturn a city government in order to steal a municipal electric system. And so, if you look at the case in Cleveland that the book presents, it's very clear. You can extrapolate that to what's happening in other cities and nationally. And so the things that belong to the people, our mail service is a good example right now. There are those who want to privatize it.
Yes.
So they can, and that would mean that some people wouldn't get service at all, and others would pay a higher premium. We have to be aware that all these public services that government, that our taxes are paying for, or that we're paying a utility fee for, that's part of the purpose of government. Government's organized to be able to create, to be able to provide safety protection, police, fire, EMS, to provide for water for everyone and for electricity in over 2,000 communities in the U.S. And as I quote a former Cleveland mayor, he said that if you don't own these these services, in time they will own you, meaning you end
Yep.
up paying a price through the roof. And also, he went on to point out that they corrupt the politics as people look for special permission and franchises so they can get monopolies, and they rule or control institutions, and ultimately they can destroy our liberties if we're not vigilant to protect that which is in the public sphere that represents democratic traditions. So the division of light and power is really about a fight for democracy that took place in Cleveland when I was mayor in 1977 to 79. But it's much more than about one city. It's about every city. It's about what's happening globally with the attempt to privatize public assets. So this is, the book arrives at a critical time, and I think that everyone who reads it is going to be not just shocked at what could happen in one community and did happen, but they'll start to look at their own town and say, uh-oh, what is actually happening in my own city?
Dennis Kucinich joins us today here on our big program. He has an incredible new book, In the Division of Light and Power, where the former Cleveland mayor, he was the Cleveland mayor from 77 through 79. He gives an unprecedented, fully documented insider's account of his battle against a shadow city government which engaged in corporate espionage, sabotage, price fixing, cutthroat competition, antitrust activities, organized crime, and wholesale fraud. Dennis Kucinich with us today, the author of this great book. He joins us today here on the telephone. Dennis, this book underlines the fact that people have been dealing with all these corporate problems and all these various underhanded dealings since the 70s. Why is it we've never been able to get our hands on this and get this fixed? Or is it just a situation of it's something we're never going to be able to get fixed?
Well, first of all, an informed citizenry is always the best hope for democracy.
Yes.
And this book is going to help to better inform people about the kind of things that go on behind the scenes. Because government does work. The question is, who is it working for? Beyond that, corruption has always existed in government. I mean, you can go back to, the beginning of our country, and throughout American history, you can see things, like Teapot Dome, for example, land deals that government officials were involved in and profited from, or unnecessary wars, which is a form of corruption, of course.
Yes.
And so we have to be vigilant, and we can't say, well, this is just in the past. Things happen now. Things happen today. Decisions are being made today that the public is not necessarily involved in. You get, those who are listening, think about your own community where a decision is made and that you would not have supported, but you just found out about it late. Public officials, in some cases, conceal information from the people and make decisions without public involvement. I mean, this is the kind of thing that I was up against when I was in Cleveland politics. But what the book says is that when people organize and get involved, they can help change the outcome. And we had 30,000 Clevelanders who signed petitions to block the sale of our municipal electric utility. And then I was elected mayor and canceled the sale. And that's where the fight really got interesting, because you would think, well, the mayor says it's not going to be sold, but Ohio's largest bank came to me on December 15, 1978, and said that unless I agreed to sell the city's municipal electric system, which provided electricity to savings to a lot of Clevelanders, that the bank would not renew the city's credit on loans that I hadn't even taken out. And it turned out that the bank and the utility were business partners. That and the private utility was a business partner of the bank. So this is really a story about deep corruption, but it's the kind of thing that because I wasn't tied to any interest group, I was in a position to tell the story. And it's taken a long time to tell it, frankly, and the time to write it, to document it. And finally, that moment's arrived, and June 8th, the book is going to be available nationally, for purchase at a number of different sites.
Dennis Kucinich joins us today. The Division of Light and Power is the latest from Dennis. He's an author and statesman. He's served 16 years in the U.S. Congress and was twice a candidate for president. During his term as Cleveland mayor from 77 through 79, the Fraternal Order of Eagles recognized him as an outstanding public official in America. He is amazing. It is my honor and privilege to talk to him today here on our big program. So, Dennis, what do you make of the current political world in the fact that we're still dealing with corruption, much like you dealt with back when you were the mayor of Cleveland?
Well, here's the thing. Corruption's been going on since the beginning of time. The question is, can the public be aware of what's happening in their own government? That's where it starts. To me, what is corruption? Well, it can actually be concealing information from the people and presenting them with decisions that are a foregone conclusion, that they may have wanted something different if they had some input. Corruption can be giving somebody a business deal without competitive bidding. It can be providing someone with a special concession that they wouldn't have got except for the fact that they did campaign contributions. I mean, what's happening now is our political system is so hamstrung by money that campaign contributors, in some cases, have extraordinary influence on politicians and often call the tune and that the politicians dance to. And so, what the book points out is that these corporate interests have such extraordinary influence that people need to be aware of them. And every city is different. Cleveland, it was the banks and the utilities and the real estate interests. Might be a little bit different in some other town. And, I'm not saying business doesn't have a role at all. Yes, they do. But their job is not to run the government. It's not to dictate public policy. This is what happened in Cleveland. They ran the government, they dictated public policy, and it was all in the interest of furthering the profit of a few at the expense of the many. So, what is this all about? It's a call for an informed citizenry. The Division of Light and Power is about more than the fight of a young mayor to save an electric system that belonged to the people. It's about a call for democratic involvement in decision-making. It's about a call for people's awareness of what actually is happening. And in some ways, it's a roadmap, James. If someone has trouble figuring out what's going on, you read this book, and it'll give you some idea of the questions that, you might need to ask in your own town.
Dennis Kucinich joins us today here on our broadcast. In the Division of Light and Power, it is the latest from the great Dennis Kucinich. Now, Dennis, did they try to buy you at some point? Did they just try to just pay you off to get you to go away? Or?
Well, I was offered $50 million in loans for the city if I agreed to sell the electric system, which would have, at that point, that would be like, I don't know, maybe $500 million today, which would certainly cause any public official to look good if you can, put money out there for projects. But the bottom line is I couldn't be bought.
Yeah.
And there was nothing that I wanted. I just wanted to serve, and it was something I wanted for myself. I wanted for the people to have lower electric rates and reliable electricity, and a choice. Because in Cleveland, we had this unusual situation. Private and public utilities competed side by side to the city, and the private utility wanted a monopoly. They wanted to wipe out public utility, which is what the fight was all about. So, my feeling is that if you have integrity and if you're elected for the right purpose, which is to serve, you're not going to be vulnerable. But what happens is that so many people go into public life, and you think the only way you can get elected is to have these interest groups contribute to you, and it becomes institutionalized, and pretty soon people don't even understand that they're being bought off.
Dennis Kucinich with us today. He joins us live here on our big broadcast. The title of the book, The Division of Light and Power. It is going to be available on June 8th. It is getting a lot of rave reviews already. What did you think of some of the different reviews you've gotten on the book so far, my friend? Dennis, you still with us?
Yeah.
I was asking you about reviews. What do you think of some of the reviews that have spilled in for the book so far?
It's very gratifying. I mean, to have the book compared, called a cross between Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and The Godfather, to have it compared to the movie Chinatown, and to have reviewers say that this is one of the most important books that's been written about American history in terms of what happens in cities. To have it compared to the work of Lincoln Steffens, look, it's very humbling, and I'm very grateful to get this response. I will tell you, a lot of work went into it, James. I mean, I started the book in November of 1979. I was so close to the events, I couldn't finish it. I was having trouble writing it because the experience that I had was so shocking. To stand for something where and then have everybody condemn you for it and blame you for what was the right thing for the community. And then, it took years and years for people to figure out what happened. And this book is the story of the journey that I took, not only in helping to save an electric system, but in the political cost of taking a stand and of eventually a comeback and an opportunity to tell the story. So this, to have people applaud the book, I appreciate it so much. And and anyone who's interested in how government really works, on the potential of one person to make a difference, take a stand, because there are many people out there listening who ask themselves, well, does it matter if I step forward? I can tell you it does. 100% it matters. And you might be the one that's going to make a difference in your own community. Does it mean everyone's going to agree with you at once? No. But does it mean that ultimately the things that you stand for may prevail in the interests of the people? Yeah, that can happen. And so, the Division of Light and Power was my opportunity. It reflected my opportunity to take a stand. But people are called upon to do that every day. We're called upon to do that in our own personal lives. And anytime you take a stand, there's always a risk.
Dennis J. Kucinich with us today. He joins us live here on a broadcast of the Division of Light and Power is the latest from him. And so you wrote the book, you started the book, then you put the book down. Take us through the writing process for all this. How did you end up eventually finishing this puppy, my friend?
Well, what you'll be reading is the seventh draft.
Wow!
And when you consider that the book is over 600 pages, you can understand that what it was like to finish a draft, not be happy with it, and just basically start over again and again and again. And the documentation was important. So it took years to finish the documentation of it, because everything in the book is documented. And life intervenes. I mean, when you're writing or you're involved in any creative project, you work on it and then something happens in your life. In this case, I was elected to the state Senate, then the US Congress. And so it was critical for me to finally have an opportunity when I left Congress in 2013 to focus. And even then, I couldn't finish it, even though I worked for years on it. Just wasn't where I wanted it. I mean, this is a journey. My God, I had no idea I'd ever get it done. And when I finally got it done, it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And I'm looking at a printer's galley right now of the book, and it's in some ways it's almost hard to believe that I actually finished it, because it seemed like it would never, it never happened. But I stayed with it. And that's another lesson. Don't quit. If you've got something you think's important, stay with it. no matter how long it takes, and that kind of what I did. But I will tell you, it was always rattling around there saying, write me.
That's tremendous. It is Dennis J. Kucinich. He's with us today here in our broadcast. So, Dennis, with this book, The Division of Light and Power, with putting this book out there and talking about some of the corruption and just the way that this book has just been shaped and the events that shaped it, is that, with all the corruption and everybody being essentially working together against, the people, is that how we end up with somebody like Trump?
No, I don't think. I think that the disappointment that people have with the political system is one of the reasons why Donald Trump got elected. We have to make sure we understand cause and effect here.
Yeah.
The system had its corruption way before Donald Trump took office.
Yeah. And
some people who are Trump supporters would point to it and say, yeah, well, that's why they voted for him. We must understand that, because it's not as though, he's gone and everything's just lovely again. No, it's not true. I mean, this is an ongoing process. A democracy requires that people are vigilant, no matter, if your friends get elected or somebody who you don't support gets elected. It is important for people to pay attention to what's going on. We cannot leave government to, people, only to people who are elected. This is really another message in the Division of Light and Power, and that is an informed citizenry is the best hope of a democracy.
Yes.
And so, it wasn't that I did all this by myself. I had a lot of people help. I had a chance to lead, and sometimes, you realize that if the people are well informed, then it makes it easier to lead. And I can tell you that the people in Cleveland are extraordinary. They're tough customers, but at the same time, the events described in the Division of Light and Power are so extraordinary that people kept being forced to kind of choose what version of reality was being thrust on them by the media or by those who were trying to function in their interests. So, there's never been a story quite like this in American politics. And I'm pleased to have been the person that had the chance to tell it. And for those people who are looking for you read this book, it's going to change the way you look at politics and the Division of Light and Power. And, I will tell you that my experience, which I recount in the book, certainly changed the way I looked at politics as I got into it, because I come from the neighborhoods of the city. I grew up pretty much believing that what I was seeing was what I was getting. But then you get into the political world and you find out there's smoke and mirrors and deception. And, that's not how I grew up. And yet that's what I entered into once I got into the political world. And I explained that.
Dennis Kucinich with us today. The Division of Light and Power is the latest from him. And he has put a lot of time and effort, just, years and years. It seems like decades to bring this book to life. And talk to me about the endorsement that Ralph Nader gave you. When I saw that on the press release and then just reading through the book and everything, it's amazing that Ralph Nader was so gracious with his endorsement.
Well, Ralph Nader is somebody I admired as a young person, and everyone who's ever purchased a product that didn't work or that was defective in some way owes Ralph Nader a debt of gratitude, because he really has done everything he could to make sure that that Americans are going to be protected in the marketplace. And so and he's been a fearless advocate of government of the people. So to have Ralph Nader's approval and endorsement of this book has been very gratifying because I admire him and because he's someone who is incorruptible. I'm very grateful. And the endorsement of Ralph Nader for this book has been fantastic, and I'm just so excited about it.
Now, Dennis Kucinich has got this incredible book, The Division of Light and Power. It's about your time as the when you were helping the folks of Cleveland, and you were actually, which is quite shocking to a lot of folks that listen to this broadcast, you were actually trying to be a public servant. Because a lot of folks just get in there to get a check there, Dennis.
Well, you know what? I tell what I experienced.
Yes.
And the book opens up, by the way. The book opens up on a story where I'm with my wife and we're shopping at Christmas in downtown Cleveland, and all of a sudden all the lights go off. And it's Christmas time. The lights are out in downtown, and what the heck's going on? So I had just been elected to city council. I hadn't taken office yet, but I called Muni Light, and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" It's just a few days before Christmas, all the lights are off in downtown, and it turned out that there was a boiler that was out, and then I got into this conversation, and the person tells me that the system needed repairs and needed some help, and the private utility was blocking the city, and it resulted in the city not being able to keep the lights on. And so I got deeper into this, and this is somewhat of a spoiler alert, but it needs to be said. I found out that the frequent blackouts that were occurring on the city's electric system were actually being caused by the private utility. They were sabotaging the city's utility in order to build a case for their takeover of the city utility and achievement of a monopoly.
That's just amazing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but this is all documented. I'm not just making this up.
Well, yeah.
So, and so what happened is, I take the reader into this journey, and I promise, if you know about government, this will blow your mind. But if you don't, it takes you into a dimension that I think will be helpful for people to understand that these kind of things actually went on. Corporate espionage, sabotage, price fixing, assassination attempts. It's all in this book. This book is let me tell you, it's a wild ride for the reader, but imagine what it was like to live it.
Yes. Yes. That is just amazing. It is Dennis Kucinich. He's with us today. The Division of Light and Power. And one of the things I've always liked about Dennis is that he's always been ahead of the curve on all sorts of things. One of the things that you've talked about in the past when you ran for president is you expressed support for cannabis. And what do you think of the way that the states and the laws and everything around the country are starting to favor what you always had talked about?
Well, in that case, I look at it this way. First of all, just so people can understand. I never smoked cigarettes, let alone cannabis, and I don't drink. I never have. So, this wasn't about, oh well, this is from my experience. I can say no. To me, it seemed like a matter of liberty and people able to, in some cases, reduce the pain they were having with chronic conditions and being able to have a certain amount for personal use. To me, this didn't seem like a big deal, but for some, they felt that it was like this cultural dividing line between law and order and a breakdown in the society. I always saw it as a matter of individual choice and liberty. People choose to drink. I don't drink, but I don't. Somebody does it. Do it in moderation. You're going to be okay. People want to use marijuana. Do it in moderation. You're going to be okay. I'm not for government trying to control every aspect of people's lives. And so my position on marijuana now, we're seeing many states, as you say, coming around. I think sooner or later the federal government will, and it'll be good. And then there'll be a point at which someone will wonder what was the fight all about.
Yes. And Dennis Kucinich has a tremendous new book, The Division of Light and Power, where he details his time as just trying to fight corruption. He fought off several attempts at being paid off and almost murdered, and it is an incredible story that he had to live just because he wanted to do like most public officials should be doing, which is helping the people. Dennis, another thing that I would like to get your thoughts on is that you voted against authorization of military force against Iraq in 2002. Another thing you've been proven right on, because we went over and we pretty much just broke that country, and we continue to break the Middle East. How does it feel to be vindicated on some of this stuff?
Well, let me tell you, right? I'm going to draw a parallel here.
Yes.
So the division of light and power, all the documentation, which goes back with records that are in some cases 60 years old or more.
Yes.
I carried around that documentation with me for years, and almost 100 boxes, with the boxes being chock full of files. Well, when 9/11 happened, I was a member of Congress, and I had a sense when I started to hear the discussions around Congress that the U.S. was going to respond in a way that was dangerous for the country. I went to the floor of Congress right after 9/11, and I said, "Hey, we better be very careful how we respond here, and we shouldn't be going after people who had nothing to do with this, and how we respond is important."
Oh yeah.
And I was one of the first ones that went to the floor to warn the country about be careful with lashing out. So what happened is, I kept, from 9/11 on, I kept every single scrap of internal communication that came to members of Congress, inside reports, exchanges among members, all kinds of documents, plus news stories that came out of those documents. I kept it all. And I kept it in over 100 volumes, each one about 4 or 5 inches thick, that are waiting for the story to be told. In a very documented way, again, from an insider. And I can tell you this, that our American people were led down a rabbit hole of total lies. And I knew it, and the experience that I had in Cleveland, which is reflected in the Division of Light and Power, to be able to understand what's going on, even though others will say, well, you're crazy, you don't know what you're talking about, you're not a good American, whatever. I knew exactly what was going on. And that's why I led the effort to oppose the war in Iraq. So that same, if you go to the Division of Light and Power, and you'll see the kind of thinking that's reflected of a kind of detective representative or detective mayor who's going deep into asking the questions that have to be asked. And then you'll know why I did the same thing with Iraq, and why, if I write a book later on about what happened there from the insider standpoint of what happened in Congress, it's the same instinct that you have about this isn't right. And even though I had hundreds of members of Congress who were saying, you're wrong, why are you doing this? Our country's at risk. Iraq attacked America. Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. I knew all that was a lie then.
Yeah.
Nobody proved it.
Yeah.
And so part of this, James, is this, that there's a point that each of us reach in our lives where we realize that certain things are either true or untrue. And there are people who try to convince us that what we know to be true is untrue, or that we know to be untrue is true. You have to be strong and centered in your own beliefs and your own awareness, and trust yourself at times, so that you're not going to be misled. And the whole country, our country was misled on Iraq, and I was one of the ones who was not misled, took up the challenge, organized an effort against the war, gave hundreds of speeches in Congress about the wrongheadedness of our policy, and I grieve the loss of all those men and women whose lives were taken as a result of their service to our country, and perhaps over 1 million Iraqis whose lives were dramatically altered or ended as a result of the war. So, but again, that thinking, if you want to know how I think and what an independent thinker looks like, and there's a lot of independent thinkers out there because that's what your show's about.
Yep.
Listen, you read the book, and you get strengthened in your own opinions on things, because we're all subject to that larger, society about, you're right, you're wrong, or whatever. It's about taking a stand for oneself in many ways.
Yes. And this book, absolutely tremendous. Dennis Kucinich, The Division of Light and Power. And Dennis joins us today here in our program talking about this book. Once the book was put together and you got, because you mentioned this was like the 7th or 8th draft of this of this book, did anything change along the way with the direction of the book? Did anybody try to tell you, hey, you probably shouldn't have put that in there, something like that, or did you get no pushback at all?
No, I first of all, I didn't share it except with some of my attorney friends.
Yeah.
And the whole question is, can you document what you're saying? Because truth is the defense.
Yes.
And the answer is yes. Now, I will tell you this, that as long as the book is, and as voluminous as it seems, I could have written another 500 pages easily, and I did. The book, I ended it at a certain point. It just had to, the book has to have a beginning and an end, and I ended it, and I didn't put everything in there that I wrote. Let's put it that way. There's a lot more to the story, but there's a point at which, I was just exhausted writing it. It says, okay, this is it. Done. Okay.
So Dennis, did you write this with, a pad and paper, or did you use a desktop, or did you use those things they used to have called typewriters?
All of the above. All of the above. When I started it seemed like, I was using a chisel and stone, but
that's
great. Some of it was typewritten notes, some of it was handwritten notes, which I have. I keep very close handwritten notes from the time when I was in city council and mayor, and I kept all these files and files and files. And when I started to write, there was one draft I was working on in 1983, 84. You're going to love this. I was just getting, used to using a word processor, okay?
Yes.
And so I was, into, about 100 pages of this particular draft. And the electronic dog ate my homework. It disappeared.
Wow.
And I don't know where it just disappeared from the computer, and I didn't know where it went, and I couldn't find it. It's just like the file disappeared. It was gone. I don't know whether it's crashed or what, and I'm not necessarily a nerd.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't. I know some things, but I didn't know what to do, and I couldn't recover it. So I started over again. But then finally, when I moved along and came to a Word program and learned how to save stuff, then it was a little easier.
Well, the trials and tribulations. You could write a book on just what it took to put this book together.
Yeah, I know. If I have another 40 years, maybe I will.
Now, Dennis
Okay.
Kucinich is with us today, The Division of Light and Power. It is a tremendous book. I've got a couple more questions for you before I let you go, my friend. I really appreciate you spending as much time as you did with us today, because this book is so important and the story needs to be told, and I'm so glad that you pushed through with it and that you've got this book out there and it's going to be released here in several days. One of the things that I thought one of the things that I've always liked about you is that you always think that healthcare is an important thing and that it's a right in democratic society. Why is it during the worldwide pandemic that most of the government officials in the United States, when every other, civilized nation in the world gave their people short-term universal basic income and health care, the United States just went no health care, $600? Why? Why?
I asked that same question repeatedly. Of course, over the last couple of years, there's been, some increased benefit, but not nearly enough for families to support themselves when their principal wage earner or wage earners were out of work. Look, I asked James, I've asked that question so many times about, if you can't get health care for all during a pandemic, when can you get it?
Yes.
And it just underscores the selfishness of a system where the insurance companies continue to cash in and the pharmaceutical companies continue to cash in. It's like we don't have. It's sad, really, and I continue to stand for that. At some point, I think it'll happen in America, but only when we break the hold which these insurance companies have on our politics. And it is unmistakably it's literally a death grip they have on our politics.
Yes. Dennis Kucinich with us today, The Division of Light and Power. That is a tremendous book. It is written about Dennis's time of being from 77 to 79. He served as the 53rd mayor of Cleveland, which was a very tumultuous term. He survived a recall election. He was successful in a battle against the municipal electric utility. He talks about that battle, which is a hell of a battle, in the Division of Light and Power, which is going to be released here within the next few days. Dennis, I guess my final question for you is that now that this is out and that you talk about everything you did, is this setting you up for another run to be the mayor of Cleveland? It seems like this would be the perfect way for you to go, I did this once. I can do this again.
Are you trying to make trouble for me?
I don't know. It just
it's the best I can do. The best I can do for you, James. And I hate to end it.
No.
The best I can do for you is to say no comment.
Hey, you've learned something, Dennis, about being a politician.
Yeah, really. Not much, but that's one.
Not much, but well, Dennis, you are amazing. I really have enjoyed this. I really thank you for spending as much time and being as honest and as open as you have about this book and everything going on in the world around us. You have been such a supporter of everything from, trade to youth rights to, LGBT, everything. You are what I wish other politicians would use your mold to be, because we need a lot more Dennis J. Kuciniches out there than we do the Trumps and the the crazies of the world.
You're very kind, and I'm very grateful to have had the chance to be on your show.
Yes.
And make sure we get a link, because we'll, send it.
Oh yeah. We're as my good friend Frank Catolo used to say, the web will be lousy with this interview. We will put this all over the place, my friend. And
well, thanks so much,
Dennis.
James.
Thank you for doing this. And the Division of Light and Power is the latest. And Dennis, thanks for doing this. And I will talk to you soon. Thank you, sir.
Thanks again.
Appreciate it, my
Good
friend.
day.
There he goes, Dennis J. Kucinich. He joins us today here on our big program, and that was amazing. And thanks to the book PR folks and Elaine and everybody else who brought this interview to us today. That is going to wrap us up here for this edition of Quad Pod. If you want to get a hold of us on Twitter, you can do so at JIGGYJAGUAR. You can also find us on Facebook as well. Download our app. It is available in both the app stores, iPod and Google Play. And yes, I know we don't have iPods anymore, but I will continue to say iPod probably for the rest of my days. And that wraps it up here. We thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.